You ever wonder how a relationship can go south so incredibly fast? Well, that's what we're looking at today. In just a few short years, the relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela went from a $500,000 donation all the way to accusations of narco-terrorism. So today we're going to trace this really dramatic escalation during the Trump administration using the timeline from our source material as our guide.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a number that's, well, it's pretty surprising. $500,000. This is how much Citgo, that's the U.S. subsidiary of Venezuela's state-owned oil company, actually donated to Donald Trump's 2017 inauguration. You'd think that's an act of goodwill, right? A pretty interesting starting point, especially given what happened next.
Because just 7 months later, this was the public message. President Trump, out loud, said, "We have many options for Venezuela, and by the way, I'm not going to rule out a military option." So you have to ask yourself, how do we get from a massive corporate donation to a public threat of military action in just a few months? That's the story we're going to unpack.
And that brings us to what we're calling Act 1 of this timeline, the unraveling. We're zeroing in on that first year, 2017, and these really contradictory signals that basically set the stage for a total breakdown in relations.
Now, you've got to understand, Trump's military option comment didn't just fade away. The reaction was immediate and it was loud. Venezuela's defense minister called it an act of supreme extremism. This wasn't some quiet diplomatic disagreement. No, this was a public denouncement that really echoed across the region, with allies like Bolivia and Cuba jumping in to condemn the statement too.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit and see how all this tension builds to Act 2, the breaking point. We're now jumping to 2019, and this is the year the diplomatic relationship didn't just get strained, it completely snapped.
And get this, it all happened in a single day. The speed here is just wild. On the morning of January 23rd, you have Juan Guaido declaring himself interim president. By the afternoon, the U.S. makes a huge move and officially recognizes him. And by that same evening, Nicolas Maduro hits back, severing all diplomatic ties, a complete and total rupture in less than 24 hours.
And this created this immediate, fascinating standoff. It's a direct clash over who's actually in charge. As you can see, the U.S. said, look, we don't recognize Maduro anymore, so he can't kick our diplomats out. But Maduro's government was saying, nope, you have 72 hours to get out. It's two competing claims to power playing out in real time.
So, how do you even deal with a situation like that? Well, you use a diplomatic tool called a protecting power. The U.S. tapped neutral Switzerland to handle basic stuff for Americans still in Venezuela. This move pretty much made it official. The U.S. no longer had a direct diplomatic presence in Caracas.
So with the diplomats gone, where do things go from here? Well, that leads us straight into Act 3, the maximum pressure campaign. With diplomacy off the table and Maduro still in power, the U.S. strategy totally shifted gears into a much more aggressive, multi-front campaign of military posturing and legal attacks. And maximum pressure wasn't just one thing, right? It was a coordinated attack on multiple fronts. The source material points to more U.S. warships in the Caribbean, the unsealing of federal indictments against top Venezuelan officials, offering huge cash rewards for their arrest, and framing the whole thing around this new charge of narco-terrorism. And to give you an idea of just how personal this got, look at this number, $15 million. That's the reward the U.S. State Department offered for any information that would lead to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro himself. This clearly wasn't just about policy anymore, it was personal. So how do you react when you're labeled a narco-terrorist with a multi-million-dollar bounty on your head? Well, Maduro came out swinging. He publicly called President Trump a cowboy and dismissed the whole thing as a racist plot. It was a crystal-clear sign that neither side had any intention of backing down. Okay, now for our final section, the epilogue. And I really have to pause here because it is super important to understand what's coming next. What we're about to discuss is the source's projection of a possible future, a hypothetical scenario for 2025 based on the path these policies were on. And I want to be absolutely crystal clear here. Just like our slide says, the source material projects a future based on these policies. These are not events that have happened. This is a look at where the source suggests all these tensions could potentially lead. So in this projected future, the source outlines a really controversial deportation process for February 2025. First step, invoke the Alien Enemies Act, a law from 1798. Yeah, 1798. Step 2, use that ancient law to completely bypass normal immigration procedures. And Step 3, deport accused Venezuelans not back to Venezuela, but to a third country, El Salvador.
You can imagine the legal and human rights challenges a move like that would face.
And the final projected move, according to the source, would come in March 2025. That's the formal designation of Venezuelan criminal groups like Tren de Aragua and the Cartel of the Suns as foreign terrorist organizations. Doing this would unlock a whole new set of powerful tools for the U.S. government: broader sanctions, travel bans, prosecutions, really cementing that narco-terrorism framework.
So when you step back and look at the whole arc, it's really something. You start in 2017 with a donation and a threat. By 2019, diplomatic ties are completely gone. In 2020, you have a narco-terrorism indictment, and it all leads to the source's projection of controversial deportations and terrorist designations in 2025. The path of escalation is just stark.
And all of this leaves us with a big, important question to think about. What does this timeline, both the parts that happen and the parts that were projected, really tell us about the tools, the speed, and the possible consequences of modern foreign policy? It's a powerful reminder of just how quickly the diplomatic landscape can shift from fragile cooperation to outright hostility.